Doug Noll here, and in this video I'm sharing 3 key practices that will teach you the difference between empathy, sympathy, and compassion. So why is this important? Well, people often confuse sympathy, empathy, and compassion, and they think they're trying to help people when they offer sympathy, but they're really distressing people even more. People really don't understand what empathy is, and they're really pretty clueless about compassion, even though they might use all of these words interchangeably. So I want to clear up the mystery and show you why you should not use sympathy, how to use empathy, and how to develop compassion. Understanding the differences can help you help others. So let's start with sympathy. Sympathy is pity-based. It's focused on the sympathizer, the person who is offering the sympathy, because you'll often hear words like, "I'm so sorry that your dog got squashed by a car," or "I'm so sorry that this horrible tragedy happened to you." And when somebody offers sympathy, they're doing it from their frame of reference, not from the frame of reference of the person who has been distressed. Sympathy does not show understanding, and sympathy is often self-soothing and therefore selfish. What I mean by that is people, when confronted with the person in distress, often feel anxious and they want to soothe their own anxiety. So they do that with sympathetic statements that show no understanding whatsoever. And that's why people feel that's why when people who are in distress are offered sympathy, they often feel more distressed because they feel like they're being patronized or they're being disrespected. And sympathy usually makes the distressed person feel worse. Empathy is something that's completely different. Empathy is a learned ability to read, assimilate, interpret, and reflect back the emotions of another from that person's frame of reference. So empathy is all about understanding and reflecting back the emotions of the distressed person. There are 2 kinds of empathy: cognitive empathy and affective empathy. Cognitive empathy is a process in which you ignore the words of the distressed person, you read their emotions silently to yourself, and then you reflect back the emotions with a simple you statement. Like you would say something like, "You are really sad. You're grieving. You feel completely lost and abandoned." So you're going to use a you statement and state back the distressed person's experience. That is called cognitive empathy. After you've practiced cognitive empathy for a while, you will begin to develop automatically affective empathy. Affective empathy occurs when you're with a distressed person and you automatically feel what they're feeling and then reflect back what you're feeling to the distressed person. And it will develop automatically as you practice cognitive empathy. And that gets us to compassion. Compassion is empathy plus the impulse to help relieve the distressed person. And the way that I like to teach this is, think about holding a little baby who just pooped in the diaper. Now, you're not going to get mad at the baby. You're going to say, "Oh, little baby, you just pooped. You're really a stinky mess. Let me see if I can clean you up and make you feel better." That is what compassion feels like. So it's empathy plus the desire or the impulse to try to help somebody or help the distressed person get relief from whatever that distress is. So that is sympathy, empathy, and compassion in a nutshell. So my name is Doug Noll. I'm a lawyer turned peacemaker, author, speaker, trainer, and visionary. And I'm the co-founder of Prison of Peace, along with my colleague Laurel Coffer. And I'm dedicated to helping people live fulfilled lives. I offer individualized training and coaching to a select group of clients. And if you'd like to set up a call to explore the possibilities, email me at doug@dougnoll.com. And sign up for the basic emotional competency course at https://dougnoll.co emotional-competency. If you like this video, give me a like and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you next time.